Well, it's 7:01 and we are very punctual here at the City of Lacey. So anyone who's on our webinar, I see a few attendees. Welcome to the City of Lacey Shoreline Master Program Update webinar. And my name is Jessica Brand. I'm an associate planner here with the City of Lacey. And we'll have 3 other panelists as well available to answer questions for you this evening. We have Ryan Andrews, Long Range Planning Manager.
Hello.
We have Alex Capron, Senior Planner with Watershed Company.
Hello.
And Kim Van Zwallenberg, Senior Planner with the Washington State Department of Ecology.
Hi.
And our agenda tonight is pretty straightforward. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes of a presentation from Alex, and then we'll take your questions. And if you have them along the way, just type them into the Q&A screen at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them after the presentation. And again, all attendees are muted, and so type in your questions in that Q&A panel, and we'll see them there. Also, we are recording this webinar, and it will be posted online. If you know someone who missed it, you can certainly point them to our website. It'll be posted tomorrow. And once the presentation starts, we have some slides. We're going to shut off our videos, and we'll be available for audio at the end to answer your questions. And Ryan's going to be monitoring and moderating your questions for us. With that, thank you again so much for joining us, and take it away, Alex. I'm going to turn my video off.
All right. Great. Thanks, Jessica. All right. And yeah, before we dive into the periodic update, we'll give it a little background here. So what is a Shoreline Master Program? So it's really a separate regulatory document. It's also a policy document that's based on a set of 3 principles. One, to ensure shoreline ecological resources remain intact and are protected. Also to promote public access and recreational use of the shoreline. And then 3, to give priority to water-dependent uses. So the city did a comprehensive update of its SMP in 2011. So it was a 70s era regulatory document that was updated about almost a decade ago. This was done as a regional effort by the Thurston County Regional Planning Council. And the SMP is referenced in Lacey Municipal Code section 16.18. So let's see. And then where does an SMP apply? So shorelines of the state are identified in a couple different parameters, one being lakes greater than 20 acres in size, and this also includes associated floodplain and wetlands. And then within the city of Lacey, this is 5 lakes. So a portion of Long, Pattison, Chambers, and then most of Southwick and Hicks Lake. Also Woodland Creek. So for rivers and streams, that's 20 cubic feet. Mean annual flow is the threshold there, and that's kind of a measurement. And then any marine shoreline in Washington State. So here it's the Puget Sound. Oops. And zooming in, so there are what's called shoreline environment designations. So these are, essentially like an overlay in addition to the zoning code for that land. So there are 4 designations within city limits and the UGA that are listed there. And then you can see the zoomed in section of Woodland Creek. You also look and see that there are some associated wetlands as part of Woodland Creek's shoreline environment designations there. Looking at the lakes, yeah, you've got essentially, a mix between residential and undeveloped uses. Yeah, the predominant use along Lacey shoreline is shoreline residential. But yeah, there are some urban conservancy and natural designations, which are typically more restrictive in what you can do within those designations. So what is a periodic update? So Department of Ecology requires SMPs be updated every 8 years. So a periodic review is to make sure that SMPs are consistent with state law, as well as any changes to local plans and regulations, and any new or improved data and information. And I'll talk a little bit more about these in upcoming slides. So a real key element here in this periodic update is that it will not go back to the baseline that was used to determine the shoreline environment designations in the comprehensive update. So we're not going back and reinventing the wheel as part of this periodic update. There also won't be a monitoring requirement, and what that means is that between when the SMP was adopted in 2011 and today, looking at, there won't be looking at a no net loss of shoreline ecological function between 2011 and today as part of this periodic update. So it is relatively limited in scope, and it's really just a chance for jurisdictions to capture changes in code and state law. So back in March, we, the Watershed Company, provided a draft gap analysis report that will be available after this meeting in a short succession. And we broke it down by 4 sections. One, looking at the state legislative amendments and consistency with the SMP's consistency with those amendments, as well as critical areas regulations. So we did a closer review of the Ecology July 2018 wetland buffer guidance, which I will talk more about, and then changes to the comprehensive plan and municipal code, and then any additional issues that staff has identified or that we as a company have identified as part of the SMP. So jumping into the legislative amendments, these are kind of high level. There's more than just the 3 listed here, but these are some of the more significant ones. Updating the development definition, so this no longer includes a dismantling of structures as a defined development, so that can help incentivize if you're looking to take something out, that you're dismantling the structure so you don't have to go through a more cumbersome permit process necessarily. Exemptions, so updating the cost thresholds for when you need a shoreline substantial development permit, when you're redoing a residential pier versus a shoreline exemption. So this is actually done through a direct RCW reference is kind of the frame of mind there. So, and that leads me to the 3rd bullet, that just as a best practice, using cross references to the Washington Advisory Code, the WAC, or the RCW. That way, if those codes at the state level change, the SMP will remain consistent with state law in the future. Looking at critical areas, so one thing that we noticed was that a lot of the critical area regulations referred to older ordinances. There was actually a minor amendment to the SMP that was done in 2015 that captured the more recent wetland delineation manual. So in 2015, they adopted the 2014 wetland delineation manual. And so now, to a greater extent, with the July 2018 Ecology Wetland Buffer Guidance, looking at that at a citywide scale. So looking at the wetland regulations and shifting those to this Ecology Wetland Buffer Guidance. Interesting to note that this guidance results in largely smaller buffers for lower functioning wetlands. So when Ecology did a larger study of reference wetlands, they felt that by combining habitat scores, it results in smaller buffers for these lower functioning wetlands. Okay, and looking at development regulations as a whole, so kind of more of the additional issues to consider. One thing that was identified was adding a qualified professional definition, and that's really to ensure that appropriate credentials for professionally prepared reports and plans are met. Also, like I mentioned before, most of the development along the shorelines of the state within City of Lacey is predominantly it's single family. So one thing we noted is to really consolidate residential development standards and move them up in the document. So this is a high use section. Let's make it available for the applicant as they're going through the process, maybe for the first time if it's a homeowner. And then really helping that kind of dovetails into the vegetation management standards. So making sure that there's clear standards in terms of when you're doing a planting plan, that it's within 10 feet of water's edge, and then giving some leeway if you're doing minor development, if you're not increasing any impervious surface, to instead of requiring professionally prepared plans for every kind of development, maybe having some allowances for homeowner prepared plans, so long as it's to scale and meets the minimum plant spacing requirements. And then, lastly, violations are always a concern if someone's doing work without permit. So, one of our considerations is adding direct citations to the WAC and city violation sections within the SMP, so that if there is a violation within shoreline jurisdiction, then that, those direct codes would apply, for development in shoreline. Okay, looking at our anticipated timeline. So all this is kind of, bearing in mind the current situation with COVID. We're at our open house right now, online open house. So hopefully the next step would be a planning commission meeting, kind of a workshop to look at a rough draft of code amendments in June. And one thing that's unique to the periodic update that wasn't done in the comprehensive update is what's called a joint ecology public comment period and public hearing. So before, ecology would, with the comprehensive update, they would look at it, and after it had been locally approved. We're here, ecology is looking at it really at the same time the city is. They have their same public comment period, same public hearing, and then what's called an initial determination, where they provide feedback on the proposed amendments, and the ecology checklist, which walks through our approach to the legislative amendments. So, with that bearing in mind, if that all comes to fruition, hopefully in August, that this can move towards a review by City Council in the fall. And so with that, come to the end of the presentation. So I will let Matt and Jessica take it away with questions.
Well, thank you, Alex. This is Ryan. I've been monitoring the question and answer section, and since this is kind of an online open house format, this is the opportunity for attendees to be able to ask questions to either our consultant, city staff, or the Department of Ecology that's present right now. So if you'd like to ask a question, or if you have a comment for the group, feel free to hit the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and that's how we will get your question. So the first question I have, maybe Jessica, this is for you. It's a common question. We have a property owner that's on the east side of Long Lake and has questions. This property is within the Lacey urban growth area in Thurston County. The question is, does Shoreline Master Program and the regulations that are being updated associated with that, does that apply within unincorporated Thurston County?
That is a great question. What's interesting about our lakes is, yes, sometimes they do share some jurisdictional boundaries. And so in this case, Long Lake, the east side of the lake is in our urban growth area, and then the west side of the lake is City of Lacey proper. And how that works is Thurston County has a Shoreline Master Program as well. And because they are under shoreline jurisdiction of the county, they would follow any county requirements and go through their permitting process. The good news is that we work closely with Thurston County for the most part, and we try to have pretty consistent regulations. And in the future, if we ever happen to annex that area, we have it already zoned for a shoreline designation that makes sense and is consistent with the City of Lacey.
Thanks, Jessica. Another question, either for Jessica or Alex. Maybe this is the best one for Alex. Alex, if you had kind of one thing to point to as far as the regulations that are being amended, what would that be? Obviously, we have a lot of residential shoreline in Lacey. A typical residential lot owner, these regulation changes, if you had to point to one thing, what change would apply to a residential property owner along the lake?
I think it's not changing any standards in terms of greater restrictions or anything like that. It's more of a reorganization of the current regulations so that they're more user friendly. There is a lot of text and it is kind of scattered throughout the SMP, and it's a very well written SMP, so the regulations themselves aren't too much of an issue. It's just getting the regulations at the fingertips of the applicant, in a place that makes sense near the front of the document. So I did mention in the presentation about the shoreline, the vegetation standards. It's just it's improving the clarity and then giving folks a little bit of leeway when they're coming in with an application if they're doing something minor. So yeah, it's really just the take home is it's minor tweaks to the code overall.
Thanks, Alex. Jessica, question for you. It was mentioned that this will be going, these amendments will be going through the city's planning commission for review before it does go to the city council for consideration. The question is, will the planning commission meeting be open to the public?
Oh, great question. Yes, we are trying to right now figure out what our summer meetings are going to look like. And so whether they are in person at that point or on an online format, much like the city council is doing right now, there's a way for remote attendance, but still real good public interaction and opportunity for public comment, either, on that platform, whatever it is, or in writing. And that might be where we need to go for having in writing comments. But we're still kind of working out the details of that. But like any meeting at the city, it has to be available to the public. So we're just figuring out the logistics right now.
An additional question, maybe this is one that I can help answer, is what are the current regulations related to septic systems along our lakes. Jessica, Alex, anybody want to take that? I can certainly take that as well.
I say go for it, Ryan.
Yeah.
All right. And this seems to be a popular question. I just got another one. So this question, very well related to septic, is how can we connect more lakefront homes to sewer? 95% of the waterfront homes on Pattison Lake have septic systems, contributing to the problem of toxic water and blue-green algae bloom. And our current Shoreline Master Program actually requires all new development to be connected to sewer. So if you were to be doing a lakefront house, for example, a new lakefront home, that is actually required to be connected to sewer. We do not allow new homes to go on septic systems within 200 feet of our shorelines. Now that's a little different when it comes to existing homes. Existing homes, there are some triggers when we do actually require homes to be connected. And the first thing is you have to have a sewer line available. And if there's a sewer line within 200 feet of a home, and if you're doing a substantial enough improvement, then we do require your home to be connected to sewer. The city's done a lot in the last 10 years to extend sewer lines across the community. There's been a real effort to try to wean off of septic systems. And the city's really focused on expanding those main lines in and around our lakes to help address water quality issues. So when new development occurs or redevelopment as well, then there is at least the opportunity for folks to connect to sewer because it is such a high priority for the city. That looks like all the questions I have for now. Maybe we can take one more minute. If there is anybody that has any additional questions, feel free to type those into the Q&A section of the webinar, and we'll be happy to answer those. Okay, so Jessica, I'm not seeing any additional questions at this point. Do you want to wrap up and talk about our next steps?
Yes. Oh, I see a question that just popped up, but
all right, before you wrap it up, is the upkeep of septic systems monitored? Again, maybe that's a good question that I could help answer. It depends on the area that you are in, and generally around our lakes and streams, the answer to that, unfortunately, is no. Septic systems are monitored by the Thurston County Environmental Health Department. The septic systems, they do monitor septic systems through basically a self-reporting inspection type system. And unfortunately, most of those areas are in that they do monitor septic systems are in shellfish protection areas. So most of the monitoring of septic systems is actually done around Puget Sound. And that the reason for that is because of the septic tank effluent leading to fecal bacteria issues that then can create kind of closures in our shellfish beds. And so that's where you're going to see septic systems monitored is along marine shorelines. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of monitoring other than kind of self-reporting by homeowners around our lakes and our streams.
Great, thank you. So I guess just to wrap up, I just want to highlight again our upcoming schedule, which might be slightly fluid with dates and times, but ideally our next step will to bring some actual draft amendments to the Planning Commission, which will be available for people to attend in whatever capacity that looks like in the summertime, whether that's June or July. And then they'll also be available, everything will be available on our website. So on this slide where you see ci.lacey.wa.us/SMP, that's where you can find a recording of this webinar. If you were able to join late, you can see the beginning of that. It'll be posted. And then any other project updates we have for either a public hearing or a meeting or documents that are available for comment and review, they'll all be posted on our website. And in the meantime, if you have questions or comments from now until any other events happening, feel free to just send us an email. My email's right there, or give us a call, and we'll certainly be able to help you out. So with that, I just want to thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate your time and good questions. And we'll talk to you soon.